This is Pat Boone, host of the Inner Strengths Foundry podcast. I believe we are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and I help husbands, fathers, and providers understand what that means for them so they are more valuable to their friends, family, and organizations. I accomplish this by working through organizations and individuals to build their inner strengths. I've held several positions in the public and private sectors and in leadership positions for the past 17 years. I've owned and operated my own business, and I am also a Christian. I love to learn and have focused my learning around science and psychology, the Bible, and gathering bits of wisdom from my almost quarter century of experience being a husband, father, and provider. I pull from all these areas during this podcast and in my life coaching practice. The Inner Strengths Foundry podcast serves two purposes. One, to help you build your inner strengths by providing knowledge, hope, and perspective. And two, to help me build my inner strengths so I can be even more effective to you. Hello, and so glad you joined me here today for another episode of Inner Strengths Foundry podcast. This podcast is focused on forging the inner strengths of husbands, fathers, and providers. We discuss various topics related to inner strengths, challenges faced by men in our marriages and our careers and as a parent, and we talk about how we might solve some of those challenges. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the power of faith for men and how it nurtures our inner strengths. Segment 1, we're going to talk a little bit about what faith actually is. We're going to define faith. Segment 2, we're going to jump into faith and personal growth, how we actually incorporate faith into our lives so we grow with faith. And we're going to talk a little bit about faith in relationships in the next segment. And in our final segment, we'll talk about using faith to overcome challenges. So first we need to define faith. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. We have hope. We have a level of hope to believe that God exists, or maybe we don't believe and don't hope in God at all. Maybe we don't believe that God exists at all. But we have a hope in our future. As I mentioned, faith is the confidence in our hope. So we may have a high hope that our future is better. Faith is that level of confidence in our hope that our future actually will be better. Or we believe that God exists. We have our hope in God. Faith is that level of confidence that we have in God or in our better future. It's important to understand that faith is not passive. There is an active component to faith. In James 2, it says, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead." And in 2 Peter chapter 1, it says, "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge." So I took a little bit of a dive into what goodness actually is. Like, was it just obeying the laws or obeying rules? What was goodness? What is goodness? And in this context, the original Greek says goodness in this context is it's a virtue or a moral excellence which is displayed to enrich life. So that might be our lives. It might be how we think. It might be how we feel. It might be in the actions we take. But that goodness that the Bible talks about in this context is mostly related to enriching life. So there's a goal in the goodness, and it's more than just words, and it's very much connected to inner strengths or character strengths. So things like kindness, honesty, love, zest, humility, gratitude. These are all inner strengths which lead to a healthy, happy, productive life. Secondly, I looked at the word knowledge. So just a reminder, for this reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge. So what is the knowledge that they're talking about here? Again, in the original Greek, what they're talking about is a functional or working knowledge. It's gleaned from a first-hand experience. So a first-hand experience in living life, first-hand experience in living with God and working with God and being with God. This implies time. We can all read a book, but it takes time to actually experience going through life. And the same thing with God. When you're experiencing God, you're maybe asking questions about, why did God put me through that? Why did this pain happen to me? And so if you believe that God loves you and that he wants the best for you, then there's a reason why you had to go through that pain. But that takes time to work through. That experiencing God and experiencing living with him takes time. And yes, we can read the Bible and we can read other books, but nothing compares to actually living and learning as you live. Secondly, I want to talk about faith and personal growth. Now, before we get into how faith impacts growth, we need to understand the process around faith. So there's 4 different concepts we need to look at here. So the first part and the foundation to everything that we need to talk about is belief. So what you believe about yourself, what you believe about your future, what you believe about God, your worldview, what you believe about people, your career, everything. What you believe. And belief is a feeling that something is true or exists. It's a choice driven by evidence. In Hebrews, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So the second step, after you have that belief, you have hope. Hope is, again, belief that your future can be better than your past and that you have a role to play in that. So if you believe that your future can be better, that is what that hope is. So in Romans, it says, not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings because we know suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. So we understand that going through life and experiencing life, as I mentioned here a few minutes ago, going through those experiences and the painful experiences are necessary to improve our hope in what we believe. So belief is our choice based on evidence. Your beliefs fuel hope. Faith is the level of confidence we have in our hope. So if we hope in God, we believe God exists, faith is that level of confidence that we have in that hope. And there's a couple of things we need to point out around faith that the Bible says. For in Romans 12:3, for by the grace given me, I say every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. And the important piece here, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. So what's that mean, God distributes faith? And secondly, in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, neither do we go beyond our limits by boasting of work done by others. Our hope is that, and the important part again, as your faith continues to grow, our area of activity among you will greatly expand. We have a couple of indications that faith can change. It can grow through actions, and it can be distributed by God. God gives each one of us faith, and for the longest time I struggled with that because I didn't think it was very fair that person X had more faith than I did, or maybe person Y had less faith than I did. Why is that? But as I went through this study, I realized that we have a part to play in that distribution of faith. That said, back in episode 5, we talked about perseverance. And we talked about resilience and the difference between the two. So just a quick reminder here. Perseverance is finishing what one starts. It's a persisting in a course of action in spite of obstacles. Resilience is the ability that we have to bounce back, to adapt, or to recover from adversity. So think of a son or a daughter abused by their mother or father. They could go through life holding on to the pain, holding on to anger, bitterness, which may hold them back from achieving their goals, or slow their return to peak performance. If they are on track, something happens to take them off track, some obstacle. If they hold on to that anger and resentment and bitterness, that may hold them back from getting back on track, depending on what the obstacle was. However, adopting an attitude of forgiveness and being given the strength to forgive from God, or realizing that they themselves have hurt others, adopting a well-rounded perspective makes them more resilient or more able to bounce back to a productive life. So we see here a good example of faith, and in this case, faith in God and what He wants for us gives us a better capability to bounce back after obstacles are in front of us. And depending on our path and our past, we have the tools to get by those things because God has provided them for us. In terms of our roles as husbands, fathers, or providers, faith guides our decisions by way of self-confidence. If we continually question ourselves and our abilities, what we're saying is we don't have faith in ourselves. So we have work to do. What areas do we not have faith in ourselves? Is it in our career? Is it our ability to parent? Is it in our marriage? Is it in our ability to manage money? What areas do we not have faith in ourselves? And what do we believe about those particular areas of our lives? And why do we believe that? If you're not a believer in God, then it's on you. It's on you only to improve that area of your life. But if you do believe in God, there's a faith that can be directed inwardly about yourself, but there's also a faith that is directed towards God, that God will provide a path for you to become better and to better manage or have a better relationship with your wife or whatever that is. So what I'm getting at here is that faith drives growth. And what I mean by that is if we have an area of low faith in our life, we have a part to play. We need to step out and potentially pray about that area or study the area or get a mentor for that area to help us improve that area of our life, which will increase our hope and our level of confidence, which is our faith in that area or faith in God, or both, is improved. So real quick, I wanted to explain how faith impacts relationships. So the three aspects to faith within the family unit, there's faith in oneself, as we've discussed, faith in a family member, or if you're talking career, a coworker or a teammate or a boss, whatever. There's faith in someone else, and then there's faith in God. Those are the three aspects. What level of confidence do you have in these areas? Or said in a different way, what is your faith in each of these areas? Character strengths are a huge part of determining level of confidence for each of these areas. So understanding and improving character strengths in yourself and supporting character strength development in family members directly impacts the faith you have in them and yourself. God does not change, and it's very clear about that in the Bible. He reveals himself to us through the Bible, but also through experience, going back to that knowledge that we talked about earlier. So as we live life and as we live with God, he shares bits about himself and helps us to understand what we read in the Bible better just by living through the things that we live through. But that takes time to experience. So our faith in God grows over time. For each of us, it happens at different rates. So there's a couple ways I'd like to share to help us fully understand and apply faith in these relationships. So first, you need to fully understand your worldview, what you believe about the world. So remember that your beliefs direct your hope, and faith is a measure of your confidence of what you hope in. So what do you believe about God? What do you believe about man? What do you believe about your family, about you, your boss, and your coworkers? What do you believe about these things? Does it need to change? How does it need to change? So going inward and fully understanding your worldview will enhance your ability to work on your faith. Secondly is learning about character strengths. So as I mentioned, within any relationship, there's people involved. People have character strengths, and they have levels of character strengths. Improving those character strengths will enable you to have more and more faith in those individuals, including yourself. So talk about what you learn about character strengths. Talk about that with your family. Maybe you make fun and creative ways that you can improve character strengths in you and your family. So in terms of overcoming challenges, we've talked about this with men. So men, career, we have issues with our career, marriage expectations, and wealth are all areas of significant challenges that men face. As I mentioned, beliefs direct hope, and faith is the confidence that we have in our hope. Will our career be satisfying? Will our marriage survive? Will our kids turn out okay? Will we have enough? What part do you play in each one of these areas? How confident are you in your abilities in each of these areas? From my own personal experience, I prayed fervently to be a good father. What I didn't do was pray fervently for my career or pray fervently for my marriage. And I struggled in both of these areas. So a way that your faith can support you in your own personal growth, first of all, is prayer. If there's any inkling that God exists to you, then pray. And start there. Start with, God, do you exist? If so, show me. Start your journey there. In terms of self, inwardly, if you don't believe God exists, then it's all on you. And what you need to do in order to use faith is start with your own accomplishments. And your own accomplishment might be, I woke up today. Start there. I woke up today. I have time on my hands. I have knowledge. I need to get better. What's the plan? How do I increase my hope? So you start working through those things. And as you start working through those things and making different choices, building upon what you've done in the past, that hope increases. The faith in your hope increases. So it comes down to choice and belief. Make your choice and start acting to support your choice. We take a look at the story of David and Goliath. David was a teenage boy, 13 years old-ish, and he goes to the army to deliver some supplies, cheese or whatever it was that he was delivering to his army. Talked to his brothers, ended up talking to the king, and told the king, look, you don't need to worry about this huge giant. And I'll read this. He says, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. So David started with the wins that he had in his past. He also gave God credit for what God did for him. So that's he and God working together to accomplish a goal. And he started there, and as we all know, David killed Goliath. So it's important to start where you're at and make conscious choices to change your hope, to believe better, which will drive your faith and then therefore drive your actions. We are nearing the end of the podcast, so I just want to cover some main points again. So first of all, we defined faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. We hope in what we believe. And we learn that faith is not passive, but requires action. Secondly, we learn that faith can grow or shrink and is distributed by God. Our faith grows as a result of persevering through challenges and choosing our beliefs wisely. Faith drives our growth. We can change what we believe about our circumstances and work at doing our part at improving them. And finally, we learn that a person's character determines how much faith we can have in them. And we can improve character by choice and effort. So, as you go into the week, I encourage you to explore and strengthen your faith. Lead yourself and your family on a journey of character improvement. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Next week, I'm going to tackle the subject of truth. So, what truth is and how it impacts our lives. As always, if you want to learn more or you have an important decision you need to make and want an objective perspective, please reach out. You can connect to me through my website at www.coachpatboone.com or on Facebook at innerstrengthsfoundry.com. Have a super week, and I'll talk to you next week on the Inner Strengths Foundry podcast.